You mentioned earlier that Braille literacy is a major problem. Talk a little bit about Braille. Now, I noticed, for example, Tracy, that you've got your notes with you here today, and while you're talking, you're reading.
Correct.
Yeah.
So John's going to talk about the challenges of Braille literacy.
Yes, there's one statistics. I know, Delegate Plumb, you were very active in the school system as a school board member several years ago, so I'm sure literacy in general is something that's very important to you. If you went to parents today, doesn't matter if the child has sight, and said, well, we want you to stop reading. We don't want you to learn print. We want you to use audio. And by the way, we don't want you to start learning as young as possible. We want you to start learning maybe in your teens or something like that. You would know parents wouldn't put up with it because their children would be handicapped, and it would be on purpose. Unfortunately, that's the situation for legally blind children today. Several years ago, a few decades, Braille was a very important part of a blind child's education. It was reading and writing, but using a tactile form rather than a written or printed form. Now, the trend has been to go towards audio, towards things recorded. Now, that's fine. They probably have a really outstanding vocabulary, have read a lot of the bestsellers, but do they know grammar? Can they spell? Can they punctuate? And if you don't know that, how are you going to find a job? So the National Federation of Blind, definitely on the state level. By the way, our website is www.nfbv.org for National Federation of the Blind of Virginia. We have program after program trying to raise the visibility of literacy, pardon the pun, to parents and to educators to let them know that there is basically a lost generation. It's hard enough to find a job, to get employment. I think, did I mention that less than half of all legally blind high school students graduate? Now, today, they talk about how important it is to have a college education is almost a minimum education level of education to get a job, to be employed, to have a future. If you don't have a high school degree, odds are so much against you. And unfortunately, 50% of all high school blind kids that's their future. So the National Federation of Blind says that it is shown over decades and hundreds of years almost that Braille is one of the most efficient methods for learning to read and write, to understand grammar, to understand punctuation, to understand spelling. And a child who learns this young enough, it's one of those youth things. If you learn it young enough and work on it and are motivated to learn, a blind child can read Braille faster than a sighted person can read a book. It has the potential for being that effective. And the National Federation of Blind, like I said, on the chapter level, on the city level, really promotes programs, and we have a program coming up in just a few months. It's experimental. Virginia's leading the way in doing this in our country, and it's a program to introduce young blind people below the age of 14, really young, those who could be most influenced by positive role models and information, that Braille is a useful not just for school, but for getting organized, for finding your way around, for telephone numbers, all that. And there's no shame in it, and you will actually can do better than your sighted peers.
Now, having said all that, am I correct in my understanding that only about 10% of blind people know Braille?
Depending upon the statistics, it can be as low as 6%, depending upon the organization. The Rehabilitation Services Administration says it's below 6%. But basically, yes, the emphasis has gone away from teaching Braille. The one many people cite children moving into the mainstream, where they go to regular schools. They used to go to schools for the blind, and they had teachers who knew these skills, not just the regular reading and writing and math, but also Braille, also mobility for blind people, how blind people can get around comfortably, safely with a cane. Now, When they go to mainstream, teachers are busy enough already. Do they have to teach Braille? Do teachers really want to promote Braille? Do teachers understand how important Braille can be? And so there's been quite a drop-off. It went from over 50%, I think, 4 decades ago, to 6%, and it's not looking very good.
And how that ties, Ken, to, essentially, if it is estimated that 70% of blind people are either unemployed or underemployed. Of those who are employed, 90% know Braille. This is a direct correlation to their employment outcome. We want our kids to live full, productive, active lives where they're successful, working citizens. And to get that, Braille is one key for that success.
And what the National Federation of the Blind then is doing with this introductory program to younger people is to try to, again, broaden the range of people who have access to Braille training.
Correct. So what we're doing here in Virginia is called the Braille Enrichment through Literacy and Learning Program. It is a 2-week immersion summer camp in Braille for elementary age and middle school students, where they focus on learning Braille in a fun, exciting environment. We connect them with positive role models, blind people who are in their community working, doing things. So that oftentimes these are the first role models who are blind that the students and their parents are meeting. We focus on having them, introducing them, learning Braille, doing fun stuff, taking them to the store and using change to buy things, taking them on the metro and learning that they can comfortably use public transportation, bus and subway, to navigate the streets, providing them orientation and mobility cane training so that they can actually interact in their community. We went to a local Walgreens and we had such a blast with these kids who were coming in with their coins and buying a candy bar for themselves. We had parents who never really thought beyond, how do I teach my kid basics, and to realizing maybe my kid at some point is going to move out of the house, live a full, productive life, get a job, have a career, have a family. The parents were very moved and developed a community amongst themselves where they were able to observe, wow, my kid is going to make it. And first you got to get the parents there and the kids there, and then the teachers to support and the school districts to support that success. And we provide that community that says you can do it. Being blind is okay, and you will live a full, active, productive life.
Now, are the dates set and locations set for the event coming?
Correct. So the dates are starting Monday, the 11th of July, for 2 weeks. It is going to be at the Lion Village Community Center in Arlington, Virginia, about 3 or 4 blocks from the Clarendon Metro Station in Arlington. And as well, we have a second program starting 2 or 3 weeks later in Virginia Beach.
And so we simply go to your website, and it's
NFBV.org, and there are details about the Braille program and application process. Students do not need to be currently learning Braille in any way, shape, or form. We are happy to take people who are getting their first introduction. We had students as young as preschoolers participating in the program. So we had last year we had students from 4 years old to 13 participating in the program, and our expectations is that there's a nominal fee. We provide them lunch. We have fun with them. The program runs from 9 to 4.
Wonderful. Now, we'll take down that website because we'll want to refer to it again. It's www.nfbv.org.
Correct.
National Federation of the Blind, Virginia.
Correct.
.org.
Exactly.
Okay. As you indicate, one of the difficulties has been as we've tried to mainstream children with special needs. That has, while it has had maybe a social aspect to it, it sometimes detracts from the special training that children need in particular programs like those of the blind.
Right. So as the original model during the first half of the century was to have specialized schools for the blind, where blind students were in a boarding school setting and would come back on some weekends. The model has shifted in the 1950s to moving to schools where students are blind students, visually impaired students are in their local communities, participating with their local schools, being with their family. Mm-hmm. The difficulty has been providing Braille and other blindness skills education for these students, orientation and mobility and cane training. Mm-hmm. And one of the challenges is for disability programs in the schools, the state of Virginia provides funding to school districts to help them provide staffing for these programs. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the way that staffing model works, there's a model for staffing to ensure sufficient caseloads for those students for all disability groups based on a specific formula. Mm-hmm. But that formula doesn't apply for teachers for the blind. And as a result, there's been, for the past 20 plus years, a fixed number of teachers or funding for teachers for the blind in the state of Virginia, even though the population has grown in the past 20 years and the population of blind kids has grown. Mm-hmm. And the result is teachers in Virginia who are teachers for the blind, have caseloads across 1 or 2 counties of 30 to 40 kids. Mm-hmm. And as a result, those kids are getting Braille education once every 2 or 3 weeks for an hour. The teachers are spending their time driving throughout the school district trying to provide some amount of training for those students. Mm-hmm. And the students are not achieving the success they need to because they're only getting it a limited amount of time. As John mentioned, both John and I have elementary age kids. If we got reading skills for them once every 2 weeks, we would be in school boards' offices complaining about that, as would all parents. Right. But teachers, parents of blind children don't know that something else needs to be expected. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we're really pleased about is the Virginia General Assembly did realize this was a problem, that there should be parity, and it passed legislation saying there should be parity. Mm-hmm. But the funding hasn't come.
Right.
And so one of the things we're trying to work with our legislative leaders is how do we make that funding come so that we're able to provide reasonable caseloads so our blind students can succeed in Braille and orientation and mobility, so we can adjust those statistics John was mentioning and to make our community, give our blind children a real chance to succeed.